Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, hello there, and welcome to OWL2022 Countdown. It's me, I'm Jake, I'm your host, and we've got just 8 more teams, I think, to go through before finally the league starts, which is great. This is week 5, so today we're going to be going through the Chengdu Hunters, the Paris Eternal, and the Boston Uprising. This will probably be quite a lot shorter, unless there's some real big talking points to go over, but honestly, 2 of these teams have been pretty stable in their off-season with what they've actually been doing, so there's less roster changes to talk about and more forecasting where they may end up as a result of that lack of roster change. So this is still an interesting one. Obviously, if you want to see these ones live, you know where to go, twitch.tv/Jake Helios. It's down there somewhere. And obviously, for my chat who are watching this right now, it's a YouTube style, so I apologize if I don't respond. I will be responding at the end to any queries and questions, and if you guys on the tube have some queries and questions, just drop them down below. I'd love to find out. I'd love to hear it. Right, obviously I film these on a Thursday at 5 p.m. Problem with doing that is that, how do I put this? You gotta keep an eye on the Twitter accounts for Play Overwatch in the Overwatch League, because Thursday 5 p.m. seems to be the time they love to announce stuff. So I'm keeping an eye this time, making sure that I don't miss anything, because otherwise, you know, I will cry. But it doesn't look like at this current point in time, which is about 6 minutes past 5, that they've actually dropped another community update or any Overwatch 2 news per se. I'm assuming because the Anniversary Remix Volume 1 is live right now, they're probably not going to do anything like that, which is fine, not a problem, I guess. So we can just jump in with the video instead, and we're going to start in APAC. Quick PSA, actually. I still have COVID, so I apologize if my voice isn't so good or if I have to take, you know, coughing breaks, but that's just how it is when you get the global bastard, as we call it. Okay, let's talk about Chengdu. I have been excited to talk about Chengdu. I hate that the PNG doesn't have a white background on it, but you know what? We simply got to move. Fine, thank you, Chengdu, with my invisible panda up on that part of the screen. Right then, what to say about Chengdu? Well, let's start with what they did last year. 2021 was their most successful season ever. They've obviously been in the league since 2019, so the 19-20 seasons weren't terrible. They were relatively like sort of mid to low table for a lot of that. But Chengdu were that team that obviously everyone knew as the funny team. They would never conform to a meta. They were a bright spark during GOATS, you know. GOATS was a flat-out, like, sweep across all of the teams. Everyone was running the same thing. But Chengdu, they did their own thing. The Among Wrecking Ball, incredible. I've got really good memories of Chengdu from those seasons. And last year, they really stepped it up. They brought up a lot of their academy talent from Team Chaser, which is their contenders team. And they were incredibly competitive. They were shockingly competitive, actually. I think a lot of people at the start of the season probably slept on how good this team was going to be, and they ended up proving a lot of people wrong as well. They had a lot of success. They got to 2 stage finals. They made it to the Countdown Cup final against Gladiators. They also made it to the previous final, the Summer Showdown. They were excellent, and obviously you can't talk about Chengdu without mentioning Leave, you know, who ended up winning MVP for the entire season last year, and quite deservedly so. He was absolutely phenomenal. He was on another level. He is lethal, this kid, and they keep him. Let's roll into this roster. Let's look and see who they keep, who they've been, what we see him. Long story short, they had very few roster changes. This is probably one of the rosters that's changed the least over the offseason, but they do let go of a couple of pieces. So they let go of Jimmy and Taro Cookie. Just this year, they've basically gone back into Team Chaser, so that's fine. I mean, at the end of the day, they didn't really play too much. Like, Jinmu and Leave are essentially unshiftable. I personally was quite impressed with Jimmy whenever Jimmy actually did come into the team. And I think it's a bit of a shame that Jimmy's obviously going back down into contenders, but that's fine. I think he'll get his chance again at some point. I mean, you're not really gonna displace Leave, are you? And Jinmu has obviously shown himself to be valuable in the way that he is essentially a hyperflex. No, he's not a hyperflex, but he's a flex. So you got to keep him up there. But it's a shame to see him go down. That's fine. If you consider it a down step, I think they just get a little bit of time to reform their roles. They also let go of Late Young and Among. Now, obviously, I'm not covering Elsa and Kaneki. Elsa and Kaneki were very much a mid-season thing when they left the team. Shame about Elsa. Elsa was excellent for large portions of last season. Late Young comes up from Team Chaser, you know, from his two-way, and he ends up being phenomenal, if not better than Elsa. It was really impressive, and obviously Late Young is now retired. Among, essentially, you know, the face of this team up until this season, has also been let go, which is a shame, but Gaga does the role and better. He does do the tank role and better than Among, so, you know, it was probably time to say goodbye. So those are the 4 pieces that they end up losing, but, you know, as we've said, like, a couple of them have gone back to Team Chaser. They can be called upon whenever they need to be. And who do they pull up? They only pull up one player. I covered this when it actually happened last year, when they pulled him in, but Aprita has been signed from Team Chaser up to the Chengdu Hunters. Now, last week when we were going over Hangzhou Spark, we had a look at quite a lot of VODs of Bilibili Gaming versus Team Chaser from last season in particular, and we were all very impressed by Aprita. Aprita has been tearing it up in Chinese contenders. An excellent, viable option to run alongside Leave in certain metas, because if we're looking at this really, and this will probably lead into our concerns, you've basically filled most of your DPS roles here. You know, Aprita can play that hit scan. He does have a pretty good tracer on him. I mean, it's not Leave level tracer. Let's be nice here. But you know, he has the ability to play hit scan. He had an excellent Reaper on him. He can play tracer if it's called upon. Then you've got Leaf, who's essentially just good at everything he touches because he is a goated gamer. And then you've got Jinmu to play the funny roles, you know, when you need your Hanzos, your Genjis, your Pharahs. Jinmu's there, your Doomfists. I mean, can you imagine a Doomfist, a Jinmu Doomfist tank going into this season? That would be quite something. And as you can see as well, look, they were really successful, Team Chaser. You know, they obviously beat Bilibili Gaming this season. They actually won contenders in China. They've been great. They've been really, really good all season. And I expect them to be good still, because I actually think that having Kaneki and Jimmy and Tara Cookie still in that lineup is really, really good for the team. So Chengdu basically round out their DPS line. DPS line looks excellent. My only concern is that while I think that Aprita is really, really good, I am slightly concerned in the fact that Leave is still better at all of those roles that Aprita actually has under his belt, in my personal opinion. And I think that, and it's a very minor problem to have. Oh, boo-hoo, I have Leave on the roster. But at the end of the day, I've been watching lots of people's content. I've been seeing what other people have been saying about Chengdu, and it is a very slight nitpick. And you have to nitpick with Chengdu. The roster's fantastic, but you have to nitpick at these things. That Leave is still probably better at Aprita on most of those hit scan roles. So, you know, it's a case of weighing up, well, if you do enter like a hit scan tracer meta, like, do you put Leave on the tracer or the hit scan, etc., etc.? I mean, most likely you put him on the tracer, but it's a warranted concern when you know, you have one DPS player that is just good at everything. So it's interesting. We'll see how Chengdu choose to navigate that. But otherwise, look, they have a stacked DPS line. That's great. Let's talk about the support line very quickly. So the support line, they don't add anything. The only thing that changes with the support line, which I believe changed towards the end of last year, is about Yveltal. Now, Yveltal was, in my opinion, prolific last year on Chengdu. I think Yveltal had this third best break in the league, probably. People might disagree with me on that, but I think it's part of the Chengdu's absolutely monumental success. I mean, they obviously didn't win anything, but it was very successful for a year for Chengdu, because Chengdu were able to break themselves into those tournaments at least 2 or 3 times. I can't remember actually if they made it into the did they make it into the June Joust? I don't think they did. I think that was it NYXL that made their way into the June Joust? Yeah, no, but they made it into the May Melee. Yeah, okay, so they made 3 of those tournaments. That's an impressive year for Chengdu, you know? It's good stuff. And I think that Yveltal was a large part of that personally on that main support role. Unfortunately, we all know that Yveltal has some disciplinary issues. That's why Nisha came in vast portions of the end of the season. And don't get me wrong, I think Nisha's fantastic. I was very impressed by Nisha when Nisha was in. I mean, there were times when I thought that Nisha could have just been the main support for this team, but obviously wasn't compared to Evaltal. So Evaltal goes two-way. That's probably good for the dynamic of the team. You don't want to like exercise Evaltal. Like Evaltal is really, really good. But you maybe want to keep him a little bit more fringe so that, you have a disciplined core that's willing to train and whatnot. And Nisha is absolutely excellent for that. Talking about their flex supports, by the way, Monk and Faraway. Monk and Faraway 1987 are going to be sick. That's fine. That's good. Monk really impressed me last year. I have no problem whatsoever with these two staying on. Faraway came in for smaller periods of last year, but if you're going into any kind of double flex support meta, these are two players that you want to have. Unfortunately, in having Nisha and Evaltal on board, you're covering all bases here. So, good stuff. Good stuff for Chengdu. There is one area where I'm a little bit concerned, and that is tank. I think that we have to raise concerns at tank. Now, I have no concerns with Gaga. I think Gaga is brilliant. But we need to talk about the fact that he is the only tank on this team. And I think because Chengdu is inherently linked with Team Chaser and they have the ability to call people up from contenders, I don't think that this is as big of an issue as it is on certain other teams that are only running one tank. Like, we were talking about Houston a couple of weeks back, and I'm still concerned about Houston. I think that Piggy can do everything, but I am concerned about Houston because they don't have that other tank, and they would need to sign someone. They don't have a contenders team to bring someone in. Fortunately, because you're Chengdu and you've got Team Chaser in your back pocket, you can bring up like an off tank if needed. I do think that will be needed at some point in the season, but going into it with Gaga still there, who's incredibly flexible, mechanically gifted, mobility is probably going to be key. This season in Overwatch 2 is where it's likely trending. I've been looking at a lot of things from Jawscast, and Jaws has been saying similar stuff. So I believe that Gaga, with obviously the Wrecking Ball and the Winston being excellent heroes in his back pocket, obviously you got to get to grips with Doomfist, your new Orisa. I'm sure he'll be able to tackle the challenge, but I think having like the versatility in the form of a backup will be really useful. So right now, I'm not concerned because they can bring someone up, but whether they will or not is another question entirely. So we'll just have to see. We'll simply just have to see. A lot of teams at this point in time are making changes. They are bringing people in at this point in the season. So, like, for example, Boston, we'll talk about Boston in a minute, but they brought in a tank very, very recently. You've got Atlanta. Atlanta are already making changes. Atlanta brought in Speedily. I mean, I was waiting for when Speedily was going to be signed, but Speedily won't be able to play until later in the year. So people are going to make changes. They're going to bring in other players when they need it. And in my opinion, there's still a lot of rosters out there that haven't covered every base. And whether that's a benefit or a curse, we'll find out, because I actually think that one of these next two teams is going to, well, both of these next two teams are probably the polar opposites of it being a benefit and a curse. Anyway, let's round up Chengdu then to move into those two teams. The question I ask myself and the question I ask at the beginning of this video is, do Chengdu have enough to dethrone Shanghai? And while I believe that this roster is still competitive, I think that this roster should be fighting for the top of APAC. It should be at the very minimum within that top 3 in APAC, and it should be going to every single tournament. I'm not sure if this is quite enough to topple Shanghai. The fact of the matter is that I think that's going to come down to the meta, and I also think it's going to come down to how Overwatch 2 is played by both of these teams, and which set of players goes into it, which set of players hits the ground running, really, I think is the best way that I can describe it, because there's been such minimal change from both teams. I really don't think that Shanghai have proven now that they are a better roster. And at the moment, I still think they're the better roster. We'll see if a meta shifts that. We'll see if Overwatch 2 shifts that in general. But right now, my inkling is that Shanghai will be okay. I do think, though, I do have a feeling that I think Chengdu will hit the ground running. I think that Chengdu are probably going to adapt quite quickly. And we could see them being able to, claw some points off of Shanghai that way. But I think Shanghai are just such a machine. They're so well-oiled that it will be difficult to dethrone them. So my initial thought is no, but they definitely have the potential to do so. And this team should be fighting for a championship. This team should be, in theory, trying to win something this year. I think that if you're Chengdu, you would be disappointed if you didn't win something this year. You can probably take one, at the very minimum, one of those mid-season tournaments away from the Shanghai Dragons, because let's be real here, Shanghai are looking like they're going to take the rest of them, but I would trust this team to be able to take one. And hopefully you get a playoffs run as well. You just have to try and match and improve last season, really, but with this level of talent, if you don't do that and you maybe fall flat, that's not good. That's not good at all. So we'll see. But basically, Chengdu, good job. Stay strong. We love that. We love that a lot. Let us move on. Let us go. Let's talk about another team. So I mentioned that we have two teams that present themselves as a theory for having smaller rosters and maybe that being a benefit. And I also talked about teams that maybe have too many cooks in the kitchen. There's benefits and disadvantages to both. I personally, spoiler alert, think Boston have too many cooks in the kitchen, and I'm a little bit worried about it. So let's have a little cheeky look and a talk about the Boston Uprising. So Boston last year, they were pretty poor. I don't think Boston were as bad as they were in 2020 and in 2019. Like Boston 2019, 2020 has been simply poor. And I think if you're a Boston fan, last year was not as painful for you. So that's good. That was an upgrade. That was an incremental sort of like boost to the team. But you have made quite wholesale changes here, The roster is looking different. You've lost some very old pieces as well, which is quite sad. But there's been basically 6 players go out, 6 players come in. So let's see who goes out. Color Hex and Fusions. Let's start with Color Hex and Fusions because I would like to whack some respect on these guys' names. Color Hex has, at times within his Overwatch League career, been really influential and a pretty good player. I think that he's been solid. I don't think that Color Hex has ever been top tier, but they've been really impressive at periods in their career, and they've been at Boston the entire time, and I think they deserve respect for that. It's sad to see someone that was so instrumental to this team go. And I think to an extent, I would put Fusions in that as well. I don't think Fusions was on Boston in Season 1, but Season 2 and 3, I think that Fusions had good moments as well, and he was definitely passionate. In Team GB, Fusions was excellent. So, yeah, it's a shame to see these two guys go, basically vets of the scene, but, what can you do at that point? It's, they just weren't keeping up at this point. So it's fair. It's sad to see him go, but, decent careers, really. All things considered. Right, who else did they let go of? Stand 1, Gabe Ulsey, IM37. I thought IM37 had a little bit of a redemption arc on Boston. I think the IM37 of Boston versus the IM37 of Toronto was a lot more well-rounded and was a little bit better. I think if you're IM37, you get yourself back into contenders and you keep on the grind, because there's clearly something there. But, I think maybe his peak is, sort of like these mid to low tier Overwatch League teams. But I thought that he had a good year. So, coming in after obviously Jerry had a really, really hot year on this team in 2020, coming in to fill that role, I thought he did fine. So, good stuff for him, but obviously let go. Stand 1, I don't think was very impactful on this team, which is a shame, considering on Shanghai, he was really, really, really good at times. Obviously, Stand 1 was basically the backup to Fearless in a lot of metas, but I thought Stand 1 was pretty good for Shanghai in a lot of places, and he just did the job. But obviously, he's shown on Boston that he wasn't really that player to carry them above and beyond. And when Gabe Ulsey came in, I was really impressed. I thought Gabe Ulsey's Zarya was really, really strong, but clearly, I think that's really all they had. They kind of got benched by Punk, and Punk has everything going against him, bless him. I genuinely think the Boston are out to get Punk. They can't get rid of him, okay, because he's too good. But they keep bringing in people to try and get him out. And he keeps just saying, nah, I refuse. And I have to say, I'm really impressed. I really, really like Punk, but obviously Gabe also didn't work in this team. He goes, he's off on his way. The final player that leaves, Myeonbong. Myeongbong goes to New York Excelsior. Arguably, this player is the one on this team that is talked about the most, or was in the last few years. A bright spark, pretty good flex support. Look, I don't think that Myeongbong is like the top tier of flex supports. I end up saying this about someone every single week, but I think Myeongbong was pretty good. You know, I think they're okay. Going over to New York is hopefully a step up for him, you would expect, but only time will tell. So we'll see what happens. But those are the 6 that they lose, and here are the 6 that they bring in. Crimzo, Striker, Marvel, Marv 1. I mean, this is the thing with Boston, isn't it? You got to bring in the ones. You get Stand 1, Marv 1. Where's Molf 1G? Come on, bring him in. MCD, Victoria, and Itzel. Now, let's go over these bit by bit. Let's do the DPS line first. Striker. Striker returns to Boston. 2018 Striker found himself on Boston with Krusty, which is now the coach of San Francisco Shock. Moves to San Francisco with Krusty, wins 2 league titles, gets into the 4th season, and retires midway through. Okay, look, I like to quote people here, but I've watched a fair amount of Plat Chat in my time. I've listened to Avast say a lot of things, both brilliant and stupid, but I trust Avast when Avast turns around and says what the atmosphere on Boston was like with this guy in the roster. I don't know if this is a good move as a result from Boston, but I think that when it comes to the talent alone, this is now the highest point of your team. Striker is now going to be like, you know, sort of like your pinnacle, your spearhead on this team. I think pairing him up with Valentine is good. They keep Valentine. Valentine obviously was asked to do quite a lot last season when Soon had to retire early due to the visa issues. But I thought that Valentine did a relatively okay job. Like, Valentine definitely didn't set the world on fire. I thought Valentine's Echo was really good. But, you know, being shoehorned onto a Tracer for a vast proportion of last season. I mean, look, not everyone is Sparkle. Not everyone is a goated gamer. Not everyone is going to be able to pick up that Tracer and play it at a really high level, you know, when it's not part of yours. And Valentine, unfortunately, was asked to do that and wasn't able to do it particularly well. So, you know, hopefully with this rounded DPS line, he's going to be able to actually, you know, flex onto the roles that he wants to play. And they also bring up Victoria. Victoria comes up from Uprising Academy. I've watched a fair few VODs of this guy. I think Victoria's pretty decent. Gonna be honest, I think he's pretty decent. And these are VODs have been playing the Tracer. But Tracer is just one thing in the wheelhouse. He's more of a hit scan specialist as well. So having that flexibility to go onto that Tracer, to go onto that hit scan is probably really good. I think that if you're Boston, if you go into like a hit scan Tracer meta, what's obviously going to happen is Striker will probably play the Tracer and you'd have Victoria on the hit scan. But, and again, this is a similar thing that I said about Chengdu. I watched Striker play a lot of hit scan on San Francisco, and originally back in 2018 that wasn't part of his wheelhouse. But he learned, he practiced. You saw the Striker Widowmaker come out. You saw the Striker on the Cassidy, and he was ridiculously good. He learned those roles and he developed them over time, and he was ridiculously good. So once again, I think you're in a position here if you're Uprising that your best player is the one that can play, you know, both the hit scan and the Tracer, and you've got to make a choice. What do you put him onto? Again, much like Leave, I think that you put him on to the Tracer. I don't think there's a world in which Striker doesn't have it still on Tracer either. I think that I'm going to put that to bed now. I still think that he's going to be like one of the best in the world at Tracer, but we'll have to see. We'll simply have to see. Obviously, this is a similar VOD to what I played the other week. Look, you can see some of the San Francisco players in here. You can see Hydron, Reiner, Ultraviolet, Fixer. We're going to be doing Fusion in a couple of weeks' time, so that's exciting. But yeah, look, Victoria, fine addition. Good promotion as well. Doesn't need a visa, Korean, good stuff. That makes sense logistically. Support line, Faith stays. That's good. I like Faith. I don't think Faith lights the world on fire, but I think that Faith is a decent Lucio, who was actually a pretty good Brig, and obviously can play Mercy if asked. And with a lot of these teams not having Lucio players at the moment, when Lucio might become mega viable, that's dodgy. That's a little bit dodgy to me. So, hey, look, this is fine. To me, this is fine. Keep Faith. Have faith in Faith. Cool. Faith is now paired with 2 different flex supports. Crimzo comes in from the Houston Outlaws. I'm happy to see Crimzo getting another chance in Overwatch League. I thought that Crimzo was great last year. Again, not top tier. Didn't like the World on Fire. Happy with Crimzo, though, on Boston. I think they're serviceable, excellent. Also, Punk needs an English-speaking friend. That has to happen. I think. I don't know. Yeah, I like Crimzo for this team. They also bring in MCD. Okay, realistically, talent-wise, I think MCD will probably start ahead of Crimzo. But, you know, you can bring in Crimzo for that double flex meta. Makes sense. Also, if MCD had any visa issues, that's good. You've got Crimzo that's already there, has a visa, can play. Excellent. Good. I have to say, right, I mean, me jumping the gun a little bit here, but I think Boston, when they built this roster, obviously took into account, what if we have visa issues? And they obviously had backup plans and ways to work around it. So, you know, good on Boston for learning from what happened with Soon and actually getting in a roster that's going to be able to play together. You know, good stuff. Love that. That being said, MCD comes in, obviously coming in from Hangzhou. I personally, unlike Kaluge and Provide, who did their dirty work, shall we say, a long time ago, you know, in the past, and they've kind of, you know, you've had time to reform, to take that on the chin, you know, to be punished from that, and maybe not come up. MCD, this is too fresh for me. I will give, I said it last week, right? I would give Kaluge a pass. I would give Provide a pass. I'm not happy about it, but I would absolutely give them a pass if they're trying. I believe in the fact that, you know, people deserve second chances. MCD hasn't even had the repercussions yet. He got kicked off of Spark, you know, a team that was doing bad, you know, with him on it, and has immediately found another team to go on to. I don't think that's right. I think that he needed to have consequences for those actions and maybe not be in the league this year. Like, I'm not a fan of this. I don't think this is good, and I know what Boston's statement was when it happened. Boston basically said, look, we've spoken about it. This will be his last chance. Fair enough, but consequences of actions, man. I just don't think you should have signed MCD. Even though, if I take the off-server issues out of the picture, MCD was pretty talented. Like, I have to say, okay, it's a whole different question entirely when you think, should MCD have played over Coldest when it came to Hangzhou, but look, that's dead in the water, that conversation. MCD was talented, he is talented, and I'm sure that he probably will be starting for this Boston team. So, you know, that's all I'm going to say on it. I don't even want to call it a good pickup because I don't like it, so that's that. But it's good cover. They have good cover. They have a Lucio player, they have that main support player critically, and they have, you know, double flex if they need it. Cool. They've covered all their bases there. Tank. Originally, this team was keeping Punk. Punk is still here. Thank God. Punk is great. Punk is ridiculously good. I really like Punk. I hope Punk doesn't lose his place. I think if this trends into an off-tank meta, as I believe it's going to, then I think Punk has to start. I firmly believe that Punk has to start, unless there's a communication boundary, in which case Itzel will start, who only just got picked up in the last couple of weeks, I think. Itzel also, as you will see... Oh, wait, no, sorry, Itzel isn't an off-tank player. I keep thinking that they are, but Itzel has come in from Uprising Academy as well. Itzel can play the Wrecking Ball, something I haven't really seen Marvel play. Obviously, Marvel, most of the career on Soul was as a Sigma player, but... You know, Marvel has a pretty good wheelhouse. I quite like Marvel. But I think this is a fair pickup once again. I think this is potentially representative of potential visa issues that could crop up. You know, you have a player, you have an academy team, you know, you're making use of it. You're bringing in someone that you think has potential, think can cover some bases, and it's good. You know, if Marvel had a visa, which I'm pretty sure he does, I also somewhat don't understand this pickup, right? Like, this guy's talented and all, but I also kind of don't understand the pickup, in a sense. Like, I get it, but I don't. I know I've just sat there and said I get it, but I also kind of just don't, you know? Like, there has to be a reason why they've done it, and it either has to be Punk or Marvel. It's either communication, or it's the visa, or it's because there's something that's not clicking and they need to work on it. I remember, so look, we did the 5v5 VOD review. We looked at what happened between Boston and Florida, and I thought that Marvel looked fine. I thought the Marvel looked excellent, actually. I thought the Marvel's Diva was pretty good. So, you know, I don't know. I don't understand this, but as I've said, having backup is good. You know, maybe they're here to one-trick Doomfist and learn the Doomfist tank, so, you know, We'll see. We'll see why they've signed Itzel, or whether this is a case of Boston just trying to overstack their roster, like technically Gabe Orsi was. And obviously the last piece of that, as I've been mentioning, is Marvel. Marvel comes in from Soul Dynasty. I think I would like to see Marvel, you know, really just getting the chance to make this his time to shine as the main tank. So if I'm Marvel, I'm upset that they brought in another main tank, because bless him, he keeps getting shoved onto rosters with multiple main tanks. Like, his time on Soul was basically him fighting against Gesture, or was him playing Sigma with Gesture. So, okay, sure, fine. Yeah, I like this pickup, but really, I don't think the pickup of Itzel was necessary unless there really is like visa or communication issues. Like that, it's weird. It's like Itzel's great, but I don't understand. Okay, so that's your roster. Now, where do I think this roster finishes? I think this roster is firmly bottom 5 in North America, and I think that they have the potential to be qualifying for tournaments, and I think that that's what they're aiming for. They certainly have bright spots of talent on this team, and they have covered every single base, which is great. A lot of teams, i.e. like your New Yorks, your Parises of this world, haven't covered every single base. Houston as well. So many teams right now not covering their bases. Boston have certainly done that, but I am concerned about the characteristics of this team, and I am concerned of whether there is too much cooking going on in the kitchen. Obviously, striker is a large question mark with Boston, and with the rumblings that you would hear from Shock, and the rumblings that you've heard from Avast and what he was like in 2018. This might be an interesting character to have in here, so we'll see what happens there. Obviously, Crimzo is very nice when it comes to shall we say, voicing dissatisfaction with team. Obviously, Crimzo on Dallas was not afraid of basically red flagging Decay on socials. That could be quite interesting. MCD is obviously a question mark to me. And then while again, I think Itzel is a fine player, he's all right, I also don't think he's better than Marvel or Punk, and maybe you've got now 3 tanks vying for 1 position. It's different when you have 3 supports vying for 2 or 3 DPS vying for 2, but 3 tanks vying for 1 position, to me, that's a bit dodgy. That's a little bit dodgy. So look, you've got to, when it comes to the tier list, which I will be doing in week 8, the thing is, you have to, it's not just about predicting, which levels of talent like slot you in where. It's about predicting which teams are going to work and which aren't. And you have some teams that just don't work. And I don't trust Boston to make this work. I think that this is somehow going to implode on them a little bit, such as the Boston Curse. I could be wrong, but we'll just have to see. The coaching staff is basically unchanged. I don't think it's a bad coaching staff, but it's interesting having a lot of European assistant coaching with what is fundamentally mostly a Korean roster, so we'll see. But obviously some of these players, well, most of them actually, you look at Victoria, you look at Itzel, Crimzo, they've all had like time, playing on mixed rosters. They probably know English. That communication isn't a barrier. But I look at Marvel and MCD, and I'm like, okay, all right, sure. Yeah, I liken this to the North American version of the Hangzhou Spark, but much less talented. So yeah, I think Boston, I think you've got a good roster. I think this is a better roster than last year. I am a little bit doubtful of this team, though. I really don't know if they will actually be able to pull it off when it counts. But we'll see. We'll see. I'll reserve my judgment until we actually see him in action. But I think this is firmly a team that wants to be fighting to get into at least one of those tournaments, and maybe you want to try and get a run. But yeah, that's where I am with Boston. That's the Boston Uprising. So this is an example of a team that's covered all your bases, but maybe you've covered them too much and you've got too many cooks in the kitchen. Now, let's talk about a team that probably hasn't covered enough. Paris Eternal. All right. Okay. Paris last year. Look, listen, I have nothing inherently against this team. I think that this team last year had some really bright spots. The most fundamental memory to me was when Paris went and reverse swept Gladiators. You know, when Gladiators were performing, I thought that that was incredibly impressive. I thought on that day, OniGod had an absolute nutter of a game, and I thought Khan all season was just dominant. You know, it is actually a miracle that Khan has managed to stay on on this team. You know, surely you would have thought that someone would have gone for him, but Khan has been nailed down. You know, they've got him, they've tied him down in that contract. Good. Keep Khan. This is good if you're Paris. You know what? Hold on. Let's talk about what they did last year a little bit first. I didn't mention that last year. You know, they were fine. They were mid-season. They beat Gladiators, obviously. They beat a couple more teams. They were firmly mid-table. You know, they got 8 wins, 8 losses. However, I do feel the need to mention that 4 of those wins came from 2 wins against Vancouver and 2 wins against London Spitfire. Okay, right. That kind of invalidates your position a little bit, doesn't it? So I'm already not so high on this Paris team. You know, they've got bright sparks, but I'm not as high on them as other people have been. They lose Suna and OniGod. They also lost Vestola very briefly, but much like London, they decide, we need tank, bring back Vestola. Cool, all right, that's fine. I thought that Suna was pretty good last year when he was asked to like play Genjis and stuff. I thought he had some really bright moments, and I thought OniGod was excellent. I'm very surprised they've dropped OniGod. I don't like that they've dropped OniGod, and I will explain in a second why I think that they should have kept him. They bring in Glister from the San Francisco Shock. Cool. Glister can speak English. Glister's been working on a mixed roster. That's fine. Communication, not a problem. But big pickup. That's a very big pickup if you're Paris with the potential. However, you guys will notice that there's 6 people on this roster. Most of the teams are really, really aiming for that magic number of, 8 or 9? I think 8 is the number that most teams are going for right now. 3 DPS, 3 support, 2 tank is what people are mostly going for. And what you will notice is that there is I think that there's a lack of backup on this roster, personally. So, Naga was excellent at various points in the season. I think keeping Naga is good. Khan, I've already gushed about Khan. Really, really good. Glister should come in, should be able to play some really high-level hit scan and tracer for you if that's what you want. Good stuff. Excellent pickup. I thought that Dredro, when he came in, when he was asked to play in Neptuno Retired, was excellent. I think that Dredro has a pretty functional Lucio. I think Dredro's Mercy in particular was really, really good. Not as keen on their Brigitte, but, you know, we'll see where that goes. And then they keep down in Vestola as well. And not as many people are as high on Vestola as I am, but if it comes to Paris, I know people are like, oh, Khan, incredible, Naga, incredible. I really thought Vestola was excellent last year. I'm a big fan of Vestola, and I think that bringing back Vestola is great because I think I would lean on him more than I would lean on Dan. I think Dan's fine, but I think Vestola's better, you know? So, again, most of this team doesn't like the world on fire, but they've kept the core. So you've got a group of players that basically already knows how to work together. That's really good, and that's probably vital when you're dropping a player and you need to have a lot more synergy. That's good. That's really, really good. You've also kept a main support player, unlike most teams. That's really good too, because you're actually going to be able to flex into that Mercy if necessary. Now here's where the problems come in, because they've only got 2 DPS players. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Naga, especially from Wikipedia at the very least, has like a lot of this, you know, hit scan and tracer in the wheelhouse. No, not necessarily. And also, let's be real here, Naga isn't a Sparkle level talent, like I've already mentioned, where, you know, you can just pick up whatever is required and be good at it. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. Let's start with that. I think that this team looks way, way better if OniGod's name is still on this roster. Because OniGod proved last year that he can play some solid hit scan and some bloody good tracer. You know, obviously with Glister in here, you're probably going to be running Glister on that tracer or on the hit scan. But I thought that OniGod was great, and I'm surprised that they've let him go. And obviously it's probably behind the scenes thing about maybe OniGod not wanting to play, or maybe it's a financial issue. But I think OniGod should have stayed in this team. And if it was a conscious decision to let OniGod go, I disagree with it. Okay, that's the DPS problem. I think there's holes in that. Holes in that are a problem. Let's talk about their support line. Support line is good. It's fine. It's functional. They cover all bases. The only thing they don't cover is the double flex support idea. Now, the more that I've been going through this, right, and the more that I've been watching 5v5 VODs from the workshop modes, and the more that we've been hearing about the alpha that's currently being practiced on by the pros, I'm hearing more about Lucio. You know, I've seen, you know, obviously with the O2 Blast and the San Francisco Shock 5v5 match, I've seen it whereby double flex does have some major drawbacks. So I'm starting to come around to the fact that a traditional support lineup of like a flex and main is probably really, really good. And if you're like, say, Houston or New York, where you're only running 2 flex supports, you know, I'm now more worried for those 2 teams than I am for Paris. You know, I think it's more vital having that, but having that backup would be good. I don't know if Chorizo can play those other roles, so we will just have to see. But, you know, I think this is fine. Now, tank is the one area that I think you do have covered. I mean, yes, they're not top tier tanks, but I do think you have it covered. That's fine. That's good enough. And as I've already said, I like Festola. So where does that put us? Where are we sat here with Paris at this rate? Look, there's holes, but you know, maybe that you've got such a close-knit roster here that know how to work together that this is just a benefit. Maybe this team doesn't take so much time like gelling like a lot of other teams are going to have to do. You know, you're relying on a lot of these teams like, you know, Houston, New York, the new San Francisco Shock looking team, you know, Toronto. You're looking at a lot, Boston, loads of these teams above you, Florida, God, so many of them have got new look rosters, right? So many of these teams above you have ripped out their cores and only have a couple players left and have brought together brand new teams, okay? It takes time to gel. That could work in the favor of Paris, you know? Having this close-knit core that already knows how each other plays could be really, really good, you know? But also, they have a lack of cover in a lot of roles, which also could be a detriment to them. So it depends. I think that, like what I've already said with Boston, where you got too many cooks in the kitchen, but you have the cover, and it could be difficult for them all to meld, and you could have some difficult issues with that team. I think Paris don't have enough in the kitchen, but at the same time, I think that they've got, you know, a good close-knit unit that had some success last year, and probably have a good platform to build on, you know? Now, I am not actually sure if Eternal Academy is still running. I'm pretty sure Eternal Academy is gone, is what I thought. Yeah, there we go. They stopped in 2020, which is a shame. So again, Paris don't have like necessarily like a contenders team to bring people up. But the good thing about European teams is that you have, you know, countless EMEA talent that just want to come into the league. And London and Paris have shown over the last couple of years that they're willing to just bring people in from EMEA, and they're happy to go, which is fine. What might make that a little bit difficult for Paris this year is that they've actually jumped over to the US. Now, that's great for Paris in the sense that they're finally not on 90 ping. They're not on high ping anymore. That's good. That's good for Paris, okay? What's bad is that they can't rely on that EMEA talent, but, you know, maybe they'll rely on the NA talent instead, which will probably be fine. So, look, I'm not high on Paris. I think that Paris have an opportunity to be good. But I think that their overall level of talent and the lack of cover, it probably isn't enough for them to win, obviously, anything. And I think that they're probably going to be in that bottom 5 in NA that are going to be scrapping and fighting really hard to get into those tournaments. Like Boston, I think that if you're Paris and you make one of those tournaments and have one really good run in one of them that maybe gets you into play-in contention, I think that's enough for you. I think that you've had a good year, if that's the case. To be honest, I'd expect it. I expect Paris to do that at some point. Maybe a little bit less possible with the lack of Get Amazed. I'm sad that Get Amazed is gone. J-Mac's still a good coach. They bring in Mabugi, but not a lot of experience there. But we'll see how they go. We'll see how they fare. But yeah, I think that's your aim if you're Paris. But we'll see how they go. I personally think they're less likely to do that than a lot of other teams. I think you're relying on teams like Boston imploding. You know, like Vancouver maybe not being as hot as they could be, but as I've said in the Vancouver episode, I am fucking hot on Vancouver Titans. So, we'll see. We'll simply see. But, you know, Paris, stay optimistic. If you're a Paris fan, stay optimistic. I think this team is fine. I just think that there's also problems with it. But then a lot of teams have problems. You know? I think it's going to be really interesting seeing this argument of, you know, pre-existing core versus brand new talent. I want to see that play itself out, and I believe that Paris' first game is against London. No, it's against San Francisco. So already I get that, which is great. When are Paris going to actually play London? Oh, we don't know. We simply do not know. Well, we do, but I can't be asked to go look it up. You know, I think this Paris team versus San Francisco is going to be really interesting. Personally, I don't think that's a whitewash anymore. You know, I don't think that's a complete scrubbing of anyone. I think Paris could be competitive in that because again, San Francisco got to get used to it. A lot of it, you know, it's a mishmash of styles. You know, as I mentioned last week with O2 Blast and you know a lot of dark mode coming in and just you know seeing if it sticks. But you know, Paris have basically got most of their own roster, so we'll see. Be optimistic. Simply be optimistic. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our countdown 2022 week 5. Cool, right? How cool is that? How cool is that? So, that was week 5. We have 2 weeks left. There are 5 teams left to go through. So, next week, I'm fairly certain we're going to be doing the LA Valiant. I think I said that last week, but you know what? That's what we're doing next week. Sorry, I changed them on the fly. We're going to be doing the LA Valiant. We're also going to be doing New York Excelsior, and we're going to be doing Dallas Fuel. I'm very excited, very, very excited to talk NYXL and Dallas Fuel. So, you know, make sure you guys are around for that one. If you guys liked this, go check out some of the other ones we've done. We've got another 4 weeks worth of previews that we've been doing, which has been great. Go and check out maybe some of the 5v5 VODs that we've been working on. It's been amazing. And make sure you stick around for our last team previews and stick around for that tier list because we're going to be doing it. And I can't wait to be so fucking wrong. It's going to be incredible. But we'll see how we go. Until then, thank you very, very much for watching. And we will catch you all later. Goodbye.